Hi, Craig here with another new feature from Indicee. We're going to talk a little bit about parameters today, one of the most powerful features to hit the product yet. Show you how to filter a report, add that report to a dashboard, turn on the parameters, and bind those objects so you can use them a lot faster. I have a simple report here. This is showing me customer ID numbers, showing me some sales, and it's currently set to one of those top-end filters, 5 highest numbers of sales. So we're going to do a bit of filtering here, add some parameters, and show you how that works. The first is to change the 5 highest number to something that can be dynamic. Somebody's going to provide some input. So you notice there's a little tiny gears icon to the left of the number 5 there. I'm going to click on that, bring up the parameter control panel, and I'm going to give this a name. Something simple, call it top N. One of the most important things you remember when naming a parameter is they cannot have any spaces in that name. So you can have something like an underscore or a dash if you want to, but no spaces. Quick description, and I can call this top N filter for sales. And go ahead and save the parameter. Important to point out here that the parameter itself doesn't surface up on the report. I'm simply creating it in the report so that I can bind it later on a dashboard. Dashboard can have only a single report on it if that's what you want, so it's a great way to get that effect if you want a single report per dashboard. Let's go ahead and add a couple of other filters. So we could filter on things like numbers, we could filter on lists of objects, we can filter on dates and relative date periods. I'm going to go and filter this by order date. Now notice with the date filtering, of course, I could do something like, say, I want to filter this by year and pick a specific year out of a list if I care to. In this particular case, there's only 2 in my data. And it's important to remember that a little later on when we get into parameters and parameter types, because I don't want a list of items in here. I actually want to create a dynamic date parameter. So when I do that filter on order date, I'm going to filter by relative date, and I can choose from things like last 12 months, last 6 months, and these are sort of rolling months. Or in this particular case, I'm going to choose a specific year out of the specific date filters. So this gives us an opportunity to pick from a calendar control if we want to choose different types of dates when we filter things, and this gives us a great deal of flexibility when filtering specifically by dates and giving the end user, when they run the report, different ways to look at it. So I'm going to filter by a specific year, in this case 2011, and once again, like we did before, I'm going to go ahead and turn on that parameter control. Click the gears icon, give this a useful name like date, and I'll call this for filtering by year. And go ahead and save that parameter, and then save the changes to my report. So this is very, very simple thing. All I've done is set up the report so it can take a couple of bits of input once we add it to that dashboard. I'm going to go back into my reports browser. You can see I've got another report in there called employee sales. We're going to bring that in a little bit later on, but I'm going to create a new dashboard. Right off the bat, our dashboard is ready to go. It's got the grid already built in. If we want to change the size of the grid, we can certainly do that. I like using the doubling button just to double the numbers of squares on there. So I've got different ways to work with this and place it on. I'm going to add a panel. In this case, it's a content panel. I'm just going to go ahead and drag this out here so that I can add my report to the screen. Content panel is on the screen. And then I'll go and in my selection, there's my top end sales report. I'm going to apply and add that. Now we've got the report running on the screen. And the next thing I want to do is actually create a parameter. So in this particular case, I'm creating basically different input parameters so that when a user runs the report, they can pass some values through to one or many reports on that dashboard. By default, they're called param 1, param 2, param 3. I always like to name this something useful. If I want, I can keep this short, call it PRM for parameter, and then I'm going to call this date. And I'm going to drop down my list, and there's time periods. Notice at the top we have things like text and text list. These are the types of things you would use if we had chosen that specific list of years when I showed you previously. In this case, I'm going to choose time period. I can set a default value if I wanted to, and you notice once again the exact same dialog as when we were doing the filtering and setting the parameter. But in this case, I want to bind it to the report itself. So there it is, date on top end sales report. So I've been able to bind it specifically to that report, and I'm going to stop there for a moment. The next thing I want to do with this is to go ahead and add a parameter panel. So I'm going to add a parameter control to allow the user to do some input. In this case, it's a time period picker. and I can just draw that out on my screen. They can be large or small depending on what you want to do. You can see that they're dynamic and active as we're building this, which is terrific. I could go ahead and pick a specific year if I wanted to right off the bat. There's 2011. I'll add that in. But more importantly, what I really want to do is go back into the parameters collection that I just created. There's our PRM date and time period type of parameter, and it's already bound to the report itself. To the right of the drop-down list and report, I'm going to click that little plus symbol because I want to add another binding. And this is really important because this is the way we can bind multiple reports to individual parameter panels on that dashboard. In this case, you can see I've got the time period on time period picker, and that's what I'm binding it to. That was the default kind of value. So now I've linked my parameter called PRM date. It's a time period parameter. I've linked it to the report, and I've linked it to the input panel on here. Now, because the two of them are now synchronized, I can just drop down this at any time. I can change this from 2011 to 2010, and you notice the values in my report change quite quickly. So that's one of them. The other, of course, is I had that top end parameter. In this case, it was set for 5. I'm going to go ahead and add another panel on here. And once again, we want to add another parameter control. And in this particular case, it could be just something simple. A member picker if I want to, or it's really just a text entry that I want to add to this. Once that text entry input is on there, I can go ahead and add yet another parameter. And I'm looking for the kind that I want to see. So it's actually, in this case, it's a number that we wanted to see for that top end. And there it is for the top end sales picker on there. So that's now bound to the report. That tells me, of course, that the type of entry panel that I chose here for text entry is not correct. You notice there was nothing there that would allow me to bind it. So we want to go ahead and, I'll just cancel this. We want to go ahead and delete that. It was the incorrect choice. I'm going to go ahead and add the more appropriate panel, and that's the number entry panel. And that was because, of course, top end is a number entry type of value. So there's my number entry panel on there. And if I go back into my parameters collection, once again, now I can add a binding to that number parameter on there. And there it is. Top end on sales and number on number entry parameter panel. So now those are linked together as well. And you'll see if I change that to 4, my report now, because it's linked, will go and change. If I change that to 6, those values will change also. And lastly, what I want to do is add another panel because I'm going to add in another report. So I add a report content panel, and I'm just going to draw it out beside my different parameters here. I'm going to bind it to my employee sales panel, or my employee sales report here. There we go. And that's finished. And this particular one also has the ability to bind into that date time period picker. So you can see that we can link a variety of parameters together. We don't have to link all of them together on here. If I go back into my parameters collection under PRM date, I can actually add a third binding, and in this case it's on my relative date on employee sales. It's now bound to 2 different reports, and now the reports will operate in a synchronized fashion. So when I go to preview my dashboard, I can drop down my list. I can choose a specific year. In this case, 2009, 2010, 2011, whichever value makes sense. And you can see, of course, that my reports are responding automatically to the changes that I'm making here. So once again, if I set my values, let's get into 2011. Now, what's really nice about this as well is that as we're building out these different types of parameters, we can also begin to do things like use them in the titles of our reports if we wanted to, and we can use them in the titles for things like the dashboard itself. So if I wanted to go into the page settings for my dashboard, go into the header and turn on HTML, I can do a quick reference to this. I could say for date, and now add the date collection. Well, what I want to do here is simply reference the parameters themselves, and I could put in the name for this. I think I called my parameter PRM date, and close this off. And if I scoot my builder, Apply those changes. So I scoot this out of the way. Now you can see up in the header of my dashboard, and I haven't formatted it or anything, but you can see that it's responding to the changes right away. If I save my dashboard, now anytime I make these changes, it'll synchronize on the different reports automatically and also synchronize its display up in the top of this report as well. So that's how we add dashboards, add parameters to the dashboards, and hopefully you're able to get more out of this. Feel free to contact us if you have any more questions or need any more information. Thanks for listening.